Not yet. All right, we're live. All right. So I will call the meeting to order. First order of business is pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I would just ask before we move on, I just wanted to have a moment of silence in recognition of Pete Lick and all he's done for Winslow schools. Thank you, everyone. It was a very nice service on Saturday for those who were able to attend. And Chuck Keenan had some very nice words that I think said a lot about University West. So he will be missed. So we'll go on with the business that we have to deal with. First up is approval of the minutes of November 22nd, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from John. Do we have a second? A second from Earl. Any discussion, corrections, or otherwise? All in favor of approving the minutes of November 22nd? It is unanimous. Next up is approval of roll accounts dated December 2nd, 2021, in the amount of $284,494.05, and dated December 16th, 2021, in the amount of $178,382.03, and dated December 17th, 2021, in the amount of $10,474.76.
Move to approve the rolls as listed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Earl. Motion from John. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the rolls? It is unanimous. So before we go further, and I just wanted to do this we have executive session later and other people will be leaving. Want to recognize Nate for his time on the board. We do have a plaque for him. Here we go.
I didn't see that one coming.
Take care of this, Earl.
Hey, thanks.
Nate has been a valuable member of the school board, and we hate to see him leave, but all good things come to an end, and we have to move on without you. But you can always come back.
Okay. I'm not going anywhere.
I know where to find you.
You know where to find me. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. We can do that.
Thank you very much. Okay, report of committees. Do we have any committees this time around? No? Okay. Very good. Administrative reports. Well, we'll start with Jim this time.
You're going to hear from me in a little bit, so I have nothing really to add until we get to that point.
Okay, very good. How about Mr. Briggs?
Mr. Probably join me. He's got a few things from the junior high school as well.
All right.
First of all, happy holidays to all of you, and thank you for your continued support. It has been a not so easy past few weeks, as you might suspect, but I'm extremely proud of our staff and student body with the resilience they've demonstrated over the last couple of weeks. It's just been amazing for a group of middle school, high school students just to see the support and lifting each other up in the hallways, and it's just been fantastic. So thanks to the students and staff for that. I'd also like to briefly thank the staff members that you see on the resignation list tonight. All of them, and we have some big shoes to fill, all of them have made a very positive impact on our students and the Winslow schools. So they will be missed, but I do wish them the best in their future endeavors.
Good evening. Got some students, staff, and groups we would like to recognize for their accomplishments since our last meeting. First off, our math team had a meet on November 30th. Our 8th grade team, consisting of Lily Gorneau, Charles Byers, and Avery Lowell, placed in first. Congratulations to them. Also, Lily placed first as an individual, and Charles placed second, and Avery fourth. The 7th grade team placed second, and Renton O'Toole finished in the top 3. And our 6th grade team, I don't know if they were going to bring them up, but Ms. Brackett included them in our messages. They're also part of that group with Ms. Brackett. They finished 3rd. Brendan O'Toole placed 3rd as an individual. 3rd maybe, I think it should be celebrated even more, where the other schools all had team members, 2 teams of at least 4 with them. We had 1 team of 2 and still finished in 3rd place. So congratulations to them for an outstanding performance. So that's certainly impressive. Also, we'd like to recognize and thank Mr. Bigu in lieu of the Christmas or holiday concert that they have each year. Last Friday afternoon, they had the high school and junior high groups kind of sing to each other in the auditorium, and they invited us administrators and so on to come in and join that. So did an excellent job there. So that was good for them to get a chance to perform in front of others. This week, we'll have our Student Spotlight Awards on Wednesday morning, and 15 students will be recognized for their character and or academics during, well, since our past, it's a month and a half or so since we've had our last one. And also, we will have our Renaissance Assembly that morning as well, where 109 students will be acknowledged for academics. So certainly a lot going on this time of year. And we're really proud of everybody that we have that's contributed to all these awards.
And those assemblies we're doing virtual. I can share the link for anyone that would like to view. We do invite obviously the parents to visit as well. And our last thanks, I'd like to thank Mrs. Christy Gagnon. She's an 8th grade English language arts teacher. She recently did a presentation at our faculty meeting using classroom discussions as a high impact strategy. And if you recall, when I presented goals back in September, we talked about high performance, high impact strategies. Michelle has alluded to it often. It was a fantastic presentation by Christy, so I wanted to thank her publicly, and I got to see it in action in the classroom. It was just fantastic. So we'll continue to implement the strategies and share amongst our colleagues to learn and grow and become better at our practice. And that's all I have.
Very good. Any questions for the junior high?
I shared all of that with you, Amanda, through email. So. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Looks like Mr. Bell is ready to go. So.
Mr. Preble, we can just keep him up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
All right, and I'll lead off here with the high school recognition for students. We had 3 students that got recognized at the Tech Center for Students of the Month. So congratulations to those students. First off is Aiden Griffiths for precision machining, Jackson Wiegand in electrical, and Travis Reed in outdoor leadership. And our Winslow High School Student of the Month, who was nominated by 3 different staff members. So I think I haven't been here for many of these yet for the high school level, but I think that's a pretty impressive thing to have 3 different staff members that particular month really recognize that student. Joe Finks was recognized, and if you know Joe, he pretty much reflects Winslow Black Raiders, everything black and orange. So he's a great student, great ambassador or, face for our student body. And, everybody just has great things to say about Joe. Just an outstanding student and certainly deserving of this award. So congratulations to Joe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Preble. I want to do a quick shout out as a thank you to Chief Ronnie Rodriguez, the fire chief here in Winslow. Chief, for many of you that know, was instrumental in planning the Wreaths Across America stop that happened in Winslow. I believe it was not this past weekend, the weekend before. He reached out to Peter to try to get some students to incorporate them. So the art department through Mrs. Billings, Morgan Fortin and Bailey Thibodeau were recognized for creating and assembling ornaments. And Chief Rodriguez actually came to our Student of the Month presentation to deliver that in person. And as you know, obviously, we're not doing big assemblies in the gym, so it was virtual out of my office. And then we were able to call down those two students for him to give them a nice little platinum certificate that he had created for them. He also wanted to give a shout out to Mrs. Vignew in the chorus for singing at the ceremony. And it sounds like the ceremony went a little bit longer than what was anticipated, but the students, you wouldn't expect anything different from our students. They're along for the ride, and they were just happy to be there and present to those families, the Gold Star families that were there. We had our admittance day at the end of November. And for those of you that have been on the board before and those new ones, Admittance Day is a day where we bring in a bunch of colleges. This year we brought in UMaine, Husson, Thomas, KVCC, UMF, and UMA. Because of COVID restrictions, and obviously we had to stretch this out more than one day, so we did it over 2 days. And here's some numbers for you, for those of you that are numbers people. 64 of our 105 seniors participated in the event. We had 101 individual appointments with those schools that I mentioned over those 2 days. Every student that participated was admitted to at least one college. The 64 students collectively were offered $1,992,000 in merit scholarships over 4 years. Like just under $2 million that were offered to our students, which is quite amazing. Obviously, if I get accepted into 4 different schools and I get merit scholarship for 4 different schools, I don't get all of that money to go to one school. It's, unfortunately, but it's tremendous to show that the work that they do in our classrooms is paying off. So really proud of them. And that's just an amazing number. NHS held its recent induction for new members last week, and congratulations to all the new members. And last but certainly not least, I just want to say thank you for the tremendous support that our schools have received over the last couple of weeks. No doubt this has been one of the toughest stretches I've ever had to be a part of as an administrator. And it's the support of not just our community, because our community support is always awesome, but also the support of our neighboring communities with support from area schools has just been tremendous. And I can't say thank you enough. It's almost not enough to say thank you, but that's it for me.
Any other questions for Mr. Bell?
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Gallo.
Right. So, just a couple of things. I'm currently on new school because my notes are on my phone. Mrs. Vignew and the 6th grade chorus were caroling last Wednesday through our building. On the 22nd, the 6th grade band will be performing right after 6th grade Eats Lunch for their peers. Of course, we can't have a large group, but Mr. Clark asked that the students be able to perform for their peers, and so we will be doing that. Mrs. Deneen, who's one of our 6th grade teachers, coordinated a giving tree for the Humane Society, and our kids loved it. A few of the younger kids went to the tree and took presents and originally thought they were for their animals to bring home, so we had to do a little education on what the giving tree was. It was super funny. There were tennis balls, and we at one point we saw one kid walking away with it. And they thought the giving tree was for pets, was for their pets to bring home. So, but it really was a great addition to our building. And so many of our students were able to participate, so that was great. Mrs. Bassel, Mrs. Hersom, and Mrs. Carey coordinated our holiday giving tree for students. We were able to provide gifts for 35 students. I can tell you if you were in Mrs. Vassal's office today, there was barely a place to walk through. There were a lot of gifts. She was bagging them up and getting them to the families starting today. At Thanksgiving, she gave away 24 food baskets, and for Christmas, they are doing 12 food baskets for families. So that continues to be a success, and that is partly within our building. Our staff takes tags from the tree, but also a variety of outside people not only donate money, they donate gifts as well, come and get tags. So we are delighted that we've been able to help with that again this year. That is all I have. Thank you guys very much, as everybody has said, for your support this year. We all know it's been a tricky year in general, and it's very helpful to have a group of people who are here, who are looking out for our students and our staff. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I hope everybody has a great holiday.
Any questions for Mr. John? Anybody else present from the elementary school? We're all good? All right, thank you very much. Yes, Michelle, have you got something for us?
Just wanted to share that the elementary school math search committee has made a recommendation on a math program that we want to move forward with. So I'm meeting with Erica over the winter recess to look at the budget and how we can budget that, what categories and so forth, and move forward with that new program. So that comes at the end of a year and a half, close to 2 years worth of work from Keith Martin and the committee he pulled together to select a rigorous and appropriate K-6 math program. So we're excited about the future of that and getting that going. So that's my update on that program.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for Michelle? All right, Shelley Phillips.
I have nothing to report, just, winter's here and Charlie got some heat, plowing snow and throwing sand, and we're just gonna try to stay ahead of the curve and keep everybody safe. For right now.
All is good.
How long does our locked-in price on the oil last?
Through the season, through the year.
Through the complete school year?
Yeah.
I just couldn't remember where the cut was.
Budgeting for next year might be a bit of a trick, but
Yeah.
this year we're good.
I'm not even thinking about that yet.
So, any other questions for Shelley at this time? All right. Did I get everybody? Will, do you have anything for us?
Maybe the only update is this month, finally, the Maine Learning Technology Initiative laptops arrived in our schools. So Jason was able to take the old ones and swap them out with the students, so they have the newer ones in their hands. All in all, I think the process went well, and having not too much to report is partially because the team does so well here in the building. So I really need to thank them and their partnerships with the building administrators and the teachers to make everything move along well. So I think that's it.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, I think we have everybody that's here. Amanda.
46.3% of the year has gone by. 46.90% of the budget has been accounted for. If encumbered items are removed, 45.67% of the budget has actually been spent. So we're right where we expect to be this time of year, and no big news to report.
All right, any questions for Amanda? Okay.
Saying you're right where you expect to be suggests a more than extraordinarily tight budget. I mean, I know we passed a tight budget last year, but being even a little bit behind is a little bit in the direction that I wouldn't want to be in. So So I guess my question is more for Peter. How far into the year would you need to see us exactly right on the line in order to consider doing budget freezes?
The last few years that we've done freezes, we've waited until we got into the spring season. So January, February, probably around March last year, we started to look at that, consider that. That's because we're able to get a better idea of the numbers at that particular point in time. It is running extremely close. There's no question. But this year there are some unexpected expenses that we're needing to purchase, even though we have COVID funds to take care of some of the things. There are still some of the other things that are running us a little more money.
If I can just add to that, typically at the beginning of the year, we have some of those bigger payments that we pay out right at once. And even a few months ago, we were in the other direction of the percentages. And so now we're kind of creeping back up to get kind of even. And then what I've seen in the last few years is that as time goes on in spring, you're really going to see that not be quite so tight. You're going to see it spread out a little bit. And if it does stay tight, that's when we kind of talk about the freeze.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. Thank you, Amanda. Peter.
Yeah, good news. Mary Jordan, who was a special ed teacher at the elementary school, had earlier in the year sent in her resignation, and she has recently decided to rescind that resignation and sent me a letter asking if she could rescind. I said absolutely yes. Erica said absolutely yes. Kyle said absolutely yes. Knowing the situation that we are in with shortages of staff, and as you see on this evening's agenda, some of the resignations that we have, we are struggling. So that is a welcome relief for us. We said yes, and so by accepting her email, we don't need to do anything. We just continue to go as if she had never resigned. So we're all set there. Chad did a really nice job of highlighting the wreaths across America. I will second everything that he said. The students were outstanding because the caravan this year was not one trailer truck, it was 14 and a motorcade with motorcycles and the whole 9 yards. The kids did not expect to sing that long. They pretty much did a whole concert for 45 minutes to an hour. So they did an outstanding job, and Chad is right. They just went with it, and they were prepared and did a great job. Just talk about that. School safety. We had a weird message from the DOE regarding some media posts from a variety of sources nationwide. And these posts were not deemed as credible threats, but they put this information out to all superintendents as an FYI. Many people reacted in different ways. We forwarded the information immediately to the local police, to the SRO, to the administrators. Had conversations with area schools, other superintendents in terms of what they were doing. And our police department was in contact with other police departments. Following morning, sent a message out to the community regarding this. A lot of people weren't aware. Some were. We had absolutely no indication that anything was, different in the following day. Everything went very smoothly. So whatever that was all about, it's gone past us, at least for now. John?
Just question tying to that. Did they make you aware of, was the FBI involved in this at all? Because it should be a national issue if it was on the internet, right?
Yeah,
So the FBI would be looking into this as well?
yeah. I'm not privy to that, but I think it was being
Okay.
looked at.
I was just curious
nationally.
because, it seems to me like it's a national thing, not just a local or Maine thing.
Right, and for us, there was nothing, in all the local schools in this area, there was nothing. We saw some schools in southern Maine actually close. I'm not sure why. Closed for the day. I'm not sure if it was related to this, if it was another situation. It was unclear as to why they closed.
Did it have any impact on attendance for that day?
I guess I would turn to the building administrators on that one, because I'm not aware that it did.
In my building, it did. I'm not sure what percentage of kids, but we did receive several to go to health room. And that's also, they occurred. It was a huge number, but it certainly was noticeable.
We didn't see much of a change at the middle school level. We had one parent who contacted either. So.
I seem to think to recall some phone calls, but not an alarming, like, holy moly, there was some that happened, maybe some of our students who aren't in attendance as much anyway, use that as another opportunity to maybe not attend that day, but it wasn't a major. In those that, there were many calls of parents notifying us, asking reasons why. Random reasons. It wasn't.
Is there a typical month of the year when the board reviews the emergency plans?
That's a great question, because we have had a meeting scheduled to look over our crisis plans, and we had to postpone that meeting. And we are rescheduling that, and that meeting is scheduled to be with the administrators, some of the crisis team members, the police department, the fire department. So we have everybody involved to look at our existing plans. Kyle attended a session, and who did you went with Ellen Stewart? And it's the ALICE program, and we want to review that and talk about that and see if we want to incorporate more of those components of the ALICE program in our safety plan. So we had it scheduled, and we had to postpone it when everything happened. It just happened at the same time that everything else happened. We're not going to have anybody at that meeting as a result. But we will reschedule that right after the first of the year so that we can look at our plans and revisit those pieces. Some concerns have been raised by the administrative team in that, we've had COVID for 2 years, everything has been quiet, and now things are bubbling up across the country, and it's time for us to look at our plans as well and make sure that we're happy with what we have.
So it might come to the board maybe in the spring once you've had a chance to go
Yeah.
through that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
The other thing that I have, I think it's going around, John asked for monthly reports on COVID. And so here's the next one as far as we have in December. The good news, if there is such a thing as good news, and you'll see that in December, from November, there is a decrease in the number of new cases in all of the buildings, which is good news. The bad news is we're still having cases, and each one of these cases involves hours of contact tracing and hours of work, and depending on when the case occurs, it requires attention different hours of the day. John, you made a comment about not receiving as many of the notices when we have a case. We are now posting the notices when we have a case to the website only. And we've asked parents to look at that because we've had some parents ask if there was another way to notify them because they felt as they were getting too many emails, COVID emails. And so there was a feeling that parents weren't looking at their emails anymore because it was some of the same repetitive information. What we didn't want to have happen was for parents to ignore other important messages. So in an attempt to reduce some of the information that was going out, we made the decision to post to the district website, and parents can check that daily to see the updates that are there. We still need to put this online, John, you've asked us to post this, we still need to put this online, and we will do that first of the year.
Thank you. Jay?
Have you and the administration, and I assume the nurses, given any thought to how we will reopen after the break, given that we're likely to have a lot of community spread and our pool testing will be null and void for the first few days? Is there any contingency plan to think about other ways to reopen after the holidays if we have a lot in the community and we don't have the benefit of the community testing that we've relied on all fall?
In terms of planning for such an event, it's very difficult because you don't know what you're going to have. There's an assumption made that it's going to be bad. After Thanksgiving, that first week, we didn't really have, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, we didn't really have that much of an uptick of cases. It was more the second week back that we saw some things. The other thing that we had was because the students were out of school for a set period of days, it reduced a lot of the students that would normally have to quarantine because they had already gone past the timestamp, so to speak. That may happen in this case since we're going to be a week and a half out as well. We have had conversations as recent as today to talk about athletics during this break because we're not pool testing. And so what we've done is we've set up a schedule with our nurses, and we've asked our nurses to look at the days and tell us which hours, blocks of time on particular days they could give us in the event that we had something, so that we can ask for their help during vacation to do the work that needs to be done, as opposed to having everybody on call all the time, because no one gets a chance to get a break if we do that. We didn't want to do nothing. We didn't feel that was right. We felt we needed to have a system in place, and so that's what we've done over for vacation. But in terms of after vacation, like many things in this global pandemic, I think we're taking it what's going to happen and how do we deal with it. And it just might be that more kids may have to be in quarantine if we have a lot of cases and we're not pool testing at that particular point in time.
Well, we'll be pool testing on that Tuesday.
Right, but
Everybody
prior
in
to,
pool
it won't have helped them. Right.
But given, if there's exposures and incubation periods and things like that, that timing is probably not going to be bad timing to identify cases. Eric, I think Eric had her hand up and Scott.
I think the other thing is, there's a couple layers, is we continue to convey the message of that pre-screening tool, which is vital to coming back to school. In the morning, people are supposed to check and make sure that they don't have any of the symptoms listed. So, we're relying upon people to do that every day. And certainly that will be vital coming back to school to make sure that we don't have kids who have visible symptoms. And then because the testing is Tuesday, we have been getting results oftentimes Wednesday afternoon, sometimes Thursday morning, but they come back quick-ish. So I think the timing, as you mentioned, will be good in terms of they're either already going to be over it because it's over 10 days, or it might be really good timing because the PCR test will be able to pick up those that don't have symptoms, so.
Might there be a good chance to send a reminder before the end of the vacation? When the day you're coming back, to make sure you get back in that habit of pre-screening.
And it's on our website and it's in my newsletter every week. It's probably people are annoyed.
But that'd be a good use of the email. If you're gonna email some large group of
parents, that seems like it would be, hey, don't forget, we still are pre-screening.
Kyle, did you have something additional?
Well, it would be considered anecdotal data in my opinion, but it feels like to me, also hearing our nurses talk, it feels like we've reached a threshold and we'll continue to go beyond, but the pool testing really seems to be making a difference. I think more and more families have signed up for it, and that conversation when you are making contact tracing calls usually results in an opportunity to answer the question, how can I keep my kid in school? When you consider pool testing. So those numbers have just continued to grow. Maybe Erica knows what the actual raw number is of students that we get out of our whole population in pool testing, but it feels like to me that it's definitely made a difference in the last couple of weeks.
My concern is only with the perhaps unlikely situation, but it still seems like it's worth giving some thought to, that we have a lot of community spread right now. There's going to be a 10-day period in which there's not going to be any regular testing. So if we come back and start pool testing and every one of the pool groups comes back positive, or almost all of them come back positive, which is conceivable given what I'm hearing is the likely direction, then you pretty much lose the benefit of pool testing if they all come back positive. So it just, I don't know, obviously this is not my area of expertise, but I'm just concerned that with this break, by the time everybody comes back, the benefit of pool testing is that it's regular. So that you're able to pull those kids out that could potentially be infecting others. And we're going to lose all of that benefit over this 10-day period. And we could come back and be in a different situation. We would start getting data on Tuesday or Wednesday when the test comes back. But if they all come back, or almost all come back positive, then it seems to me we maybe need to have a strategy.
Well, some vaccinations are gonna kick in for the elementary level, not a lot, but those by Christmas time will be fully vaccinated, have probably a second shot. And I would say the same thing is sort of holding for our staff. We really struggled about 4 weeks ago to keep enough people in the building to be able to run school. And it seems like that has dipped down just a little bit too. Well, our staff are in full testing, so what you're talking about will be real for everybody in the building. And you may know, but we can pick out, once the pools have come back with positive, we then go back in and test all the pools, we start to pluck out those ones that triggered that pool.
So I just raised it as a question for the administration to think about. It may be worthy of further discussion or not. I'll leave it to you.
No, and I think what you're getting at, and it's a very good point, is that what if we had to go remote, if we have so many people who are out, I think is where you're going. And I think, that going has always been in the back of it. So if we had to go that route, I think we're prepared to shift gears and go that route. It's certainly not something that we want to do if we don't have to. But if that's where it goes, we'll be ready to do that if that's what we have to do.
Well, I think in a perfect world, we would be able to do pool testing every week while everybody's out. But unfortunately, it's not available. So it's one of those things. Like, you're right.
Right, there are some strategies there, and they're not necessarily strategies that you would even consider unless you see very negative trends in the community. But if there were very negative trends, you could go to the first 2 days back could be days in which each of them are half-day periods. So each student would attend half a day on the first day back. So you've only got a quarter of your population in the building at a time to get your pool testing started and have a better chance. There are things you could conceptualize. Whether or not you would decide to do them, I don't know. And I hope that, the doubling, they've been doubling a day and a half to 3 days for Omicron. Maybe that won't happen here, or maybe it won't be quite here yet. I think that it won't quite be here. It will be here, but it won't have doubled enough. I think if we were in this situation a month from now, I'd be very concerned about planning to reopen after 10 days based on the limited information I have. So we'll just play it out.
We'll find out. We'll see what the numbers show us, and today's numbers weren't an increase. So that's good.
Yeah.
And hopefully that is a trend. We've peaked out and we're start headed the other way, but we'll see. Some counties have it worse than we do, and we'll see where it goes. One thing we've learned about this is you can plan ahead, but you can't predict what the future is going to be.
That's for sure.
So, all right. You all set, Peter?
Yeah, I guess the last thing that I would say is that I would echo Chad's comments about, and I think Jason as well, about the last few weeks have been exceptionally difficult on everyone. Having said that, I can't think of any community that would have handled this better than what I saw in this community, with the support from every building, from every administrator, from teachers, from students supporting teachers, from the board supporting the requests that were being made, the various requests to assist with the family. Extremely proud of everyone in this room, and I'm proud of this entire school community. At the service on Sunday, Pete's brother, and I never met him. He sought me out of the crowd, asked if I was Peter. I said yes. With tears in his eyes, he said, "I want to thank you on behalf of a classy school system who has done what they've done for my family. We can't thank you enough." That, to me, was worth all of the efforts, all of the energy that's been made with this horrible situation. So thank you. You've all done a tremendous job. And Chad Bell, you've been a great support to your staff, keeping things going in that building. And it's gone exceptionally well. Thank you.
Well said. Okay, any questions from Peter? Okay. All right. Next up is public comment. Now, I don't see where we have any public here, but I'm not going to assume anything, and I'm going to plan for the future for those who are listening online. I did develop a statement to give people information before public comment. I've had various iterations of this from various entities, and I've kind of, I think, put together the best of all of them to put this together. So hopefully it helps inform the public as to what public comments are about and for. And my intent is this to be a regular thing in our meetings so that people understand what it is public comments are all about. So here we go. And I welcome your input, later, whenever, obviously it doesn't need to be now, on any edits or updates or whatever you might suggest. So before I open up public comment section of our meeting, I wanted to provide some clarifying information for those who have not participated in our meetings before. School boards are elected to govern their schools. Our meetings are for the board to conduct the required business of the school district. By law, this business is conducted in view of the public. While these meetings are in the public, they are not public meetings, as a legislative session is not a public meeting. They are in the public, but they are not intended to be interactive question-answer public meetings. The law requires us to provide a public comment period during our meetings. The public comment period is your opportunity to express your views within the guidelines of our policies. It is not an open discussion period. Accordingly, do not expect the board to respond to your questions or concerns tonight. While a simple question that is raised in the public comment period may be answered at the discretion of the chair, for a more thoughtful and thorough response, we suggest that questions be emailed to the appropriate building administrator first, then the superintendent, and then the board members if you want to pursue it further. Please keep in mind that a response may take a few days due to the other requirements of the day, or to allow time to gather the information requested. I also want to remind everyone that you may submit written questions to the board in lieu of speaking during the public comment period if you choose. In order that we hear from the largest number of different voices and have time to conduct our regular business, each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. At the outset, after being recognized by the chair, we ask that speakers clarify their name and town of residence. Please try to be brief and try not to repeat yourself, and please direct your comments to the board. The board will not permit complaints or allegations against staff members or particular students. These are matters of which the board is not permitted to hear in public. If there are complaints against staff or students, these will be handled appropriately through established policies and procedures. We know discussions of school-related issues can be emotional, but please remember our children are watching and we are neighbors, so please be civil. We will not permit profanity or shouting at one another or comments that disparage or attack individuals or groups of individuals. Thank you for your patience while I make this introduction. I have hope and confidence that your participation will be helpful and constructive to the board. So I think that is a piece that we're lacking as far as informing the public on what public comments is about and what it is and what it isn't. So anyway, whether we have people here or not, I think the idea of reading it for the online viewers to see, so if they do come to a meeting where they want to write public comments, they are aware of the process. So, seeing how we have nobody here for public comments, we'll move on to old business. First up is second reading of policy BCC, nepotism. We have, this would be this is the second reading. We did not make any changes at the first reading. Do we have a motion to accept the second reading of policy BCC?
So moved.
We have a motion by Earl. Do we have a second? Come on, Nate. You got one.
Second.
All right. Your last meeting, you gotta have one in there somewhere.
I was just making sure Jay was all set.
All right. But we'll now have discussion. So if there's any discussion on the topic, we can entertain that now.
I find this to be clearer than the one that came to us a few months ago, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that's what's important to me, is that a member of the public who is considering applying for a job or trying to understand can understand the language, so I appreciate the committee's efforts.
I think the policy committee did a good job revising and put it into a more usable format. Any other discussion? If not, I will ask for a vote on the motion. All in favor of approving the second reading of nepotism policy BCC? And it is unanimous? Okay, thank you very much. All right, next up is the second reading of policy JKAA, use of physical restraints and seclusion. We do have a cleaner copy of that from our last meeting, which had all the markups and strikeouts and so forth in it. Do we have a motion to approve the second reading of use of physical restraint and seclusion policy JKAA?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Jay, second by Earl. Any discussion?
I'm not wild with what the legislature has done with this, but it's really beyond our control.
I had a comment that I mentioned here. In the seclusion piece, should there be some kind of line about making sure that there's a line of sight on the child that's in the seclusion? I know that's done, but I didn't know if that actually needs to be spelled out. Just kind of cover. Isn't it section 3 seclusion? Well, actually.
Would that happen to be in the procedure?
They've actually got
It
it
is
in C.
C.
Yep. I
Okay,
hadn't read that the first time I read it through, so, yeah.
okay, very good.
I just know that that's.
Now, it made sense, what you were saying.
Having done a lot of seclusions in
All right, and very good, your experiences. Just helpful at your first meeting. Thank you.
Just a nitnoid thing, but is it possible just to make sure that we put page numbers on it? That'll just make it easier for us to do what we just did.
Yeah, that's my bad on that.
No, I mean, just because it's the biggest policy letter that I've seen.
This is probably definitely one of our bigger ones, because it's a lot of requirements.
There's a lot of information.
So it's really hard being a special ed teacher.
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah, because these change every year.
Yeah.
They add to them every year. It never stops.
Any other questions or suggestions or discussion on the motion or the policy? Okay, hearing none,
Good job.
I'll call for a vote. Do we have a vote on the motion in second to approve policy JKAA, the second reading? All in favor? It is unanimous. Very good. Thank you. All right, next up, update on winter sports guidelines. I assume that'll be Mr. Burgoyne and Mr. Bell.
Well, we've had a chance to see how the crowds look. We've had 4 junior high school basketball games, 1 wrestling meet, and 2 varsity games. And we're here to make what we think is a recommendation, again, that could change in time or could stay the same, but this is kind of what we felt comfortable doing. You just like to. For junior high basketball, we decided to go no limitation, only home spectators. And the reason is the biggest crowd we've seen in the 4 games is 29 people, and the smallest was 9. So we don't think we need to have a ticket there with the kids. It's basically you're getting parents, you're not getting grandparents, just around.
You're holding the games in this gym or?
High school.
Okay.
Yeah, because we don't have a clock in the new junior high gym. Freshman basketball, we're not going to have any we're hoping to have no limitations, home spectators only. Again, we had 1 game, we probably had 43 people there, estimate, counted by site. For the JV and varsity basketball, we're hoping to have 115 tickets available for families, along with 30 student tickets. Now, when you take that number into consideration, you're looking at 145 people. But the other day when we had the games, you have to remember, we have approximately 25 athletes in the gym too at the same time, because you have a freshman JV. And the other day we had a freshman game too. So you're really looking at a number that's going to be close to 180, depending. Now, on a girls' game, will be a lot less because our girls have a lot less athletes.
Right, and just to add to that, the 115 tickets. So if you look at like the boys varsity game Friday night, looking at the home side where the parents typically sit, there were about 69, 70 parents there. You could see there could be some more room on both sides, a few more there. And if you looked, if every student athlete used up all 4 tickets, it would be 115. So there were some students who didn't use up all of their tickets. So trying to get back to, if we had 115 people on that side, that would be pretty comfortable. You could comfortably fit within guidelines 115 people just by looking at, and looking at pictures and saying, okay, how would this look?
The middle looked like, it was kind of not cold. It was good population. The wings had a little bit more space. They didn't have to be on top of each other. The other day, we also had 17 in the student section, so we didn't have, and even that, it's 17 students, looks like a cluster, yeah.
Under your junior high, you have home spectators only, but I don't see that under high school.
Well, because families can purchase the tickets, so, obviously, if somebody.
No visitors.
No visitors and
right. But I mean, these are all going to stay within the basketball program, those tickets. So it's going to be 115 going to families. Obviously, if a grandmother's from Oakland we're not gonna say they can't come, I mean, but it's gonna be controlled by the players. Who gets the tickets.
And then we can go into that when we talk about each sport and how many tickets are available for the participants.
Are we seeing the same kind of thing at the other schools that we compete with, or are we seeing? It's all over the place. Some schools, it's wide open. Like, for example, there's a big game tonight in Skowhegan between Tacoma's boys basketball and Skowhegan. They expect a full house. So, and there's some schools who are doing like we're doing. So it's a big spectrum of what schools are doing. And we'll be hearing from you each meeting? Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, track meets, nobody. None. For track meets.
Indoor track.
Indoor track.
Because of the facilities that they don't allow.
Yeah. Bowden is not allowing anybody at just teams and the volunteers that assist with the.
Yeah, and one of the things Jim and I talked about was how can we increase the spectators for our fans to support our students? And how can we do that in a safe manner is kind of where this came from.
Kind of fill you in, we are streaming the junior high games, the freshman, the JV games. We've had Crossroads TV doing the varsity games, and the feedback has been really positive how good a production they're doing. So that's a positive sign. So it is available for people beyond their immediate family.
Does the Crossroads have the technology available to find out how many people are watching there?
I could ask him, I don't know that.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I'm not really,
I'm
not expecting an answer.
I have the technology to tell you how many watch on Facebook. Like, for example, we had 11 people watching the junior high game. That was the highest we've had online. So, again. So obviously, we're still going to have tickets available for Winslow staff to come and support their teams. We do ask them to sign up prior, just so we can keep a count on the tickets, so we don't have crowds over our estimates. As far as high school wrestling goes, we had one meet. We had 27 people there besides the athletes, so we're pretty comfortable saying that we keep the 115 tickets and 30 students. I don't think, even when they have a quad, which is 5 teams, it's not like the old days where wrestling teams are big, so we don't really consider it being working.
And I'll direct this to Mr. Belmore because I think he's been involved in the program. Is there going to be a unified basketball this year?
That's our goal. Right now, only one other school in Central Maine has committed, and that's Skowhegan. If we have to plan every game, we'll do that. Our goal is to have a team. The NPA, the KVAC hasn't committed besides us and Skowhegan playing.
I think the attendance to that game, to those games, perhaps should be modified because that's one of the keys to the whole program is having the cheering for fans. I see that only be online.
I agree with you, but I think we're making recommendations for COVID issues and how it relates, bypassing that for one activity doesn't really make a lot of sense.
That makes a good point. You make a good point, but I know that's.
And maybe by then, you're talking end of February, March.
Might be later in the spring, might be. Yeah.
Might be better.
And another thing, remember, we did this last year with no spectators, so.
I know.
Modified is not perfect, but at least there's going to be spectators there. Last year we did it with friends and family, which was me and a couple other people in the gym, so.
It's just hard to explain to kids that might not understand. They watch college, pros, other schools having packed, and then we have to tell them, no, you can't have fans there.
Yeah. The next slide, Chad.
Jay has a question, I believe.
Okay.
If 115 is a safe number, then why would we not allow 115 to junior high and freshman games and allow spectators to travel to see their kids play?
Well, the only fear with that would be is we know with home spectators we're not going to be close to that number, but we've had junior high games that have gotten into the hundreds before with visiting teams. You play a Waterville or Messalonsky. I think this is just to assure our spectators can get in. Every game we play this year, I contact their AD and they'll give me their stream. We'll give them our stream because there's nobody in the junior high leagues letting visiting spectators in it. I think except Waterville is. But we're only making it accessible to everybody through a stream. But I think when we put that in, we're just really thinking about our home spectators at this point and keeping it safe.
My question would be, other communities, even close to us, are having community spread that's out of control, in my opinion. Why would we want to open up our school community to invite that into our school? I'm more worried about making sure that our parents, our community members, our staff, our students can come in and support their kids. That's my number one goal.
It just seems that we're having a different set of rules for high school JV and varsity, because we do allow them in for that, but we don't allow them in for junior high. So if
We're not allowing visitors to come into any event.
Away visitors.
Okay, so I didn't see that on
No,
there, that
for
there was
example-
no visitors.
Let me give you an example. For our JV girls and our varsity girls, it's 12 players, 2 coaches. So 14 times 8 is 140, 12.
You don't have to.
It's 112.
It's
To get us close to that 115. Now, those players with their 8 tickets can give them to anybody they want. They can give them to their grandparents, their friends. We're gonna ask the students to do those. Any tickets they don't use a day before, we'd like them to tell us so we can open those tickets up to maybe other people want to come to the event. Most students are, for the first girls game, I think we had 51 people or something around that name. So there is plenty of tickets available. And they weren't using all their 4 tickets plus the student tickets. So I think 8 should be a number that can work for the girls basketball program. When you look at the boys, obviously our JV and varsity program has 28 people. So that's going to make only 4 tickets available for each athlete. Because our expectation is once you pay to go in the JV game, it's not fair to ask the JV parents to leave after they paid. So we want to make the JVs have access to 4 tickets too.
Right, so if you look at that number, right, so you have 25 players, 3 coaches, 4 tickets per team. That's what was currently available right now.
Yeah.
And the other night, there were 70 people in the crowd. So that tells me there was 44, 43, 42 tickets available that were not being used. So let's find a way to get people who want to come to a game that might be watching at home, right? So Earl's family may only have 2, so he has 2 extra tickets, whereas maybe Hillary's family has 6 that want to come to the game. So those 2 tickets would be available for Hillary's family, if that makes sense. So trying to find a way to allow that and get people in to support the kids. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want our families in the gym supporting our kids.
My comment was geared towards making sure we modify this one way or the other, depending on pluses or minuses in our, knock on wood, hopefully it goes in the right direction. But that's all I'm saying, is that I don't think we should have a constant that we say, okay, this is it. We've modified it since the last meeting. I think we should continue to do that if needed.
Absolutely. And conditions may warrant a conversation before the next meeting to go one way or the other. Right? If things start going like Jay was alluding to, that's happening across the nation, we may need to dial back on that and go back to only having 70 people in the crowd if it's like, well, wait a second. And that may be something you guys discuss, how you guys want to go about that between now and the next board.
Anecdotally, it's not a science-based statement, but I have not heard of any conference or division of higher level sports that's run into a situation where all their spectators are getting COVID at a higher rate than is the general public. I just haven't heard that.
You're right. And I haven't heard that either. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure our kids are staying in school. And any community spread that we have is going to affect our kids staying in school. So that's the one piece we have over professional sports or even college sports. We, at the end of the day, have to make sure kids are in the seat learning.
So wrestling has 9 players, 2 coaches, so basically each person can have 10 tickets. So basically that should make it almost unlimited in the sense that I don't imagine many people have a need for 10 tickets. We'd still open up 35 student tickets if students want to come and support their peers.
This is kind of what we already talked about.
Yeah, we talked about this. Any unused tickets we'd like to see get turned in so they can be accessed by other people. I will tell you, from the first 4 junior high games to first 2 varsity games, the toughest task I'm having is mostly with our opponents with the mask. Our students are pretty well know that they have to wear their mask. There's schools that don't have to wear their mask at home. So when they come see play us, you get a lot of this. And I'm constantly going up to coaches saying that can't happen. And that's a real challenge right now. For our kids are great. We still have to remind them and stuff. And again, it's going to slip down. And I make the announcement during the game. If your mask slips down, please recover it quickly. That's all we expect. Just like in our wrestling, you know, I watched the wrestling matches the other day, and the mask will always come down in wrestling, but at least they're starting the match with the mask up, and I understand it's gonna come down. So that's another challenge. We're bringing schools with kids that the mask is not a priority in their school, and that's challenging them. Our coaches have been great, because I've reminded our coaches, the reason we're having sports, because we're gonna do it safely, we're gonna keep kids in school. So the kids have been great. And, you know, we'll keep working to make sure we keep our kids safe.
So the extra tickets, I'm wondering how that is gonna go, because they've sent home 4 tickets to each family that are laminated for the entire season.
Good question.
So how do you give up the extra tickets when those are your 4
What's gonna
tickets?
happen is we're gonna give them index cards the night before, and they can list the people they want to purchase tickets. So example, Mason will get a card, and he can put down his 4 people or his 2 people, and he can say, I'm gonna get 2 tickets back. The tickets, we just thought that's not workable. So we're gonna give index cards the night before every game. The kids will list who they want to come into the game. And then that next morning, we'll see what's available. And those tickets could be turned over to our student body, or they could be turned over, you know, to other people who are available at that point. But we knew that was a flawed system. We kind of knew that was not.
And I think too, it'll allow some of those longtime supporters of our athletics that currently don't have an avenue to get into watch a game. It provides an opportunity for them to do that.
And I'll give you a story. I hope he's not listening. We have a gentleman by the name of Mr. Hawes who we've honored before, and he's an older gentleman, and he supports everything. He goes to soccer, field hockey, cross country, and right now there's no avenue for him to attend our games. And I haven't seen him, but I think he must have got the message. And those are the people that we like to extend, you know, hopefully have tickets to extend to people who have made this a priority to support our student athletes, and that's what we're looking to do. I think I had some kids say to me, well, I can't use all my tickets, so what can I do? And that's what we told them. Try to make them available to people who want to be here. Again, we'll hope people from our community. We're not looking to go outside the community. We're in the last slide, we're really enforcing the mask. That's something we've been diligent about. We're not having concession. We're not allowing drinks or food in the gym. That's been kind of a challenge because, as you know, with wrestling, once the kids weigh in, they want to eat because they haven't eaten in 36 hours. And what we've done is just move them in the commons, and so they can eat and safely eat. Had a couple of people who have been happy that they've had to throw away their $5 coffee. You know, when they come in, we said, you don't throw it, just leave it in the cafeteria, but you can't bring it into the gym. And these are things we kind of work with the public on. It's not always popular, but it's what we believe we need to do to keep our kids in school. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Are we gonna do revotes every time they present something new, or are we gonna?
I think we can on this. We're here. I mean, I think we do have to leave a certain amount to the administration, particularly if they need to dial things back on short notice, but I guess on the maximum side of things right now, I think this is due diligence to approve this. And as you'll see later in the agenda, actually, I had something about maybe doing a special meeting in January, which would be a little earlier in the month, so we'd be coming out of vacation and, you know, we want to entertain a change then, which is not that many weeks away. You know, we could do that if we do have that meeting, so I'll kind of put that out there too. So, do I have a motion to approve the revised winter sports guidelines?
I move that we approve it with the provision that until the board comes back, that any adjustments are made at the professional discretion of the superintendent, and that we get informed of any changes that are made at the next meeting for us to have an opportunity to provide feedback.
Second.
Duly noted. Do we have a second on that motion? Any other discussion?
I really appreciate all the effort that you guys have done, and I understand how hard it is to every single day have new demands, in both directions. So I want to commend you on all the extra work that's piled on because of this. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of approving the revised winter sports guidelines as amended by Jay? We have All right, we have 6 in favor, opposed. We have 1 opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much for the presentation and your work on that. And next up, new business. We have district overview.
All right, so good evening. We wanted to come forward this evening and share with you kind of a distance, Peter says the 10-foot distant view of our recent NUIA testing data and what it looks like, what it means to us, what we're doing with it, what we think we can do with it moving forward. So I'm just going to give you kind of an overview of both the spring and the fall NUIA data. With that being said, as we start to understand what NUIA is, I want to point out that for most schools who've been giving this over time, so some schools have mainly been giving NUIA routinely, they consider the fall administration of the test formative, in that it lets you see where the kids are as you start the year, and then you plan instruction and so forth, and then you take another measure in the winter, and you take another measure in the spring, and by the spring, you reflect on the growth that you've seen over the course of the year. Here in Winslow, we took this assessment for the very first time in many years in the spring of last year, which was that 21? We took it in the spring, and then we took it again in the fall. So we've only had 2 looks at it. And so in a sense, spring was formative for us, even though it came at the end of our school year. This is the first time we ever took it. And the fall, again, is formative for us as well. So we haven't really made any conclusions about growth because we just have not taken it enough to be able to see kids make any growth or not. The other thing you need to understand about NUIA is that it's going to be a little bit different to look at than the typical MEA tests that we're used to presenting and I'm going to talk to you about. In that the NUIA scores are not divided by, or there are no cut scores to determine what proficiency is. That is not something that NUIA establishes. That is something that each state establishes. And the Department of Education here in Maine has not done that. So when I show you some of these charts, you just have to remind yourself, as we have had to remind ourselves, we're not looking at proficient. In other words, we are not able to say X percent of our kids are partially meeting, X percent are meeting, X percent are exceeding standards, because those cut scores have not been defined.
Is, based upon what you've seen, do you believe that Maine will eventually establish those kinds of measures, or is this going to be more of a let the schools drive that decision?
It's not going to come from the schools, is my sense. I think the Department of Education is committed to using NUIA, I think, for at least the next 3 years. That being said, the Department of Education is looking at creating a Maine-specific assessment. If they do that, and that's where their energies are being placed, then I don't know how much energy is being placed on making cut scores for NUIA if in their minds they think we're only using this for a short time and then we're going to move on to our own thing. Now, being a teacher, this conversation could completely change by the end of next year, tomorrow. So for now, there are no cut scores as we look at our scores. We're just looking at percentile records. All right, so here's our first chart here. This is just looking at spring 2021, the very first time Winslow took this. And this is information that's on the Maine Department of Education's data dashboard, so the public can go in and have a look. The top section here is our reading and literacy score. The bottom section is mathematics. Those are the 2 areas we were tested on in spring. There is a third area. We were tested on that in the fall, and I'll speak to that when we get there.
So as you read this graph, the very top line here, so this is literacy reading. The top line is Winslow's performance, and below that is the entire state of Maine. So you can see we performed a little bit better. Our low-end kids performed a little bit better than the state of Maine because we have fewer of those kids in that category. We've got 15%. The state of Maine had 18. We performed a little bit better here. We're pretty, we performed better here. We performed better here. Not quite so good on the very high end. The state had 70%, we had 15%, but overall, that's how we compared to the state. Percentile ranking. Again, none of this says, you couldn't say these kids are proficient necessarily because there are no cut scores. So, and then down here we have our math scores. We're on par with the entire state in terms of our struggling learners in mathematics, and you can see we go across. Now, NOWIA points out that kids that score in the 94th percentile tend to be gifted and talented kids. Kids that are in the 60th percentile tend to be on pace for college and career readiness. So that's an important category we want to be looking at. And then kids who score in the 40th percentile or lower, and that would be our orange and red categories, those kids tend to be our students who need support. And I think if we drill down and look at those kids, that we find that to be true. Those are our kids that need support, whether it be special education, title support, or those types of programmings that we offer here. Now, we do not have a chart similar to this yet from the state of Maine because the fall testing is not ready. Let me note that here. This is looking at how we did in the spring, the very first time that we took it. Now, also in the spring, we took a science assessment called, the vendor for that is New Meridian, a brand new science test. A lot of changes with this. Traditionally, the science test was paper and pencil. This was very different. This was online. It is aligned to the new science standards, which are the next generation science standards that are supposed to be more performance-based. So the test was very different. The test presented a scenario and then several questions about this one scenario. The science tests have never been like that before. So this first year, those scores are not being published for anyone to see because it's considered a pilot year for that assessment. They are looking at how it performed. They're going to make changes and then we will reassess. We'll use it again with those changes. I would the same thing in the spring. The other challenge that we faced with this test this year was that it is required to be in person. And as you know, in the spring, we were in every other day. And some kids were completely remote by choice. So they had to come to school to take this. And, we had, I think it was 89% participation. So we did very well. And by we, I mean our guidance staff and Kyle and the different buildings, bringing those kids in an environment where they would feel safe to come in and go ahead and take this science test, lengthy test. Sharing with you any data from the test because it was not given to us. It's a pilot test and there aren't our scores presented. The only thing we were given was the percent of students who participated. And that's not just us, across the state. Nobody's getting scores for this test. All right, I want to show you the data in a couple different ways. One way to look at it is we are able, because we've taken it twice now, we're able to look at cohorts of kids. So we're able to see kids who took it in third grade in the spring, how did they do as fourth graders in the fall? So I wanted to show you a little bit of that. So this is math testing. The NOWIA in the spring is the blue. When the kids took it in the fall, that's the red. So we see third graders taking it this fall. This is the first time I did it because they were second grade. And then we start to see the cohorts. So from third grade to fourth grade in math, we see actually those kids made a little bit of growth. Now the period of time is over the summer, and we would anticipate some summer goes, some summer lag or drop, or the summer, when they forget everything you ever taught them, that thing. But so we would anticipate that, but we didn't really see that with all of the grades. We see the third graders came back in fourth grade, and they did pretty well. Our fourth to fifth grade, sixth, I'm not going to read them all to you, but you can see these are the cohort groups, kids that took it in the spring, came back and took the assessment. So that's for math. And then here's our reading score, same idea. The blue is spring, the red is fall. And you can see kids, the nice thing about this is you see kids held their own over the summer. There's nothing dramatic that you see on the chart, yes.
But isn't it true that the fall scores nationally would also represent loss? So so the fact that we stayed the same indicates that we're having the same amount of loss as other kids. It doesn't mean that we had less loss, because any cohort is going to have loss between the spring and the fall.
Well, when we're just looking at our kids here, this is not, I will show you how kids did nationally to see if that's true of all kids did that or not. These are just our kids. So if I look at this and say our kids held their own, if overall, is this score where we would want them to be, or is that overall depressed? Is it that's what you're asking? Then
No.
that's,
I guess are these percentiles or percentages? Because if they're percentages versus percentiles, then it would be different.
it's the mean score, their mean RIT score, their average RIT score, that's a grade here, and their average.
Okay, so that's what I thought.
So those are not percentiles and percentages, those are the score that, the way it gives us, it's called a RIT.
Right.
So that 200
Yeah.
bar there, 200 is where a fourth grader should be in math and that's reading, but 200 is where a fourth grader should be in the fall. Well, let me say that, that's the mean nationally, that we have a 200 school.
All right, so now we are able to look at the national norms, because this is a big test, it is a lot of big tests. And so I'm going to show you how Winslow scored in relation to national norms. But what you need to understand about these national norms is that these are pre-pandemic norms. The numbers for the national norms from NUIA are from this time frame, from 2015 to 2018, and they were published in 2020. So we call them the 2020 norms. Previously, they were the 2015 norms, and then NUIA put out the 2020 norms. But all of those norms are pre-pandemic. And that makes a difference in how you view them, because our kids took the test during a pandemic year. So what we're going to compare them to is kids that were taking the test during a non-pandemic situation. After that, I will show you there has been a study done to see how kids performed during the pandemic nationally, so we will address that after we take a look at this. So what you're seeing here is the spring. This is math. So the orange is Winslow, and the blue is the national norm, remembering that these are pre-pandemic scores. So I would expect to see some of the gapping that I'm seeing here. And this is math. I think you see we actually closed the gap a little bit more in reading. We tend to be stronger in reading. But look at our 11th grade. Our 11th graders scored better than the pre-pandemic kids did in that spring measure. And so here's how our kids did in reading. And this is what I was saying. We see that kind of close here in reading to the pre-pandemic scores. I mean, so we were so fearful when we brought the kids back in the spring. We were so fearful over the summer, like, oh my goodness, all that we've heard anybody talking about, the learning loss, the learning loss, the learning loss. And finally, we turned the page on that discussion, started talking about accelerated learning and moving the kids forward, and let's not remediate, let's look ahead. But we were so fearful, and then what we see is our kids actually did fairly well. Has there been some learning loss? Would teachers anecdotally say yes, there's some? Yes, of course. But I don't think it's to the extreme that we were also worried about, and that you heard from the media and so forth. As you look at this, I think we felt a little better when we saw this. These are our scores in the fall, same idea. So this is fall mathematics. So this is the kids coming back, different age group. So the orange would be Winslow, the blue would be the national norms, again, pre-pandemic numbers.
The question that's raised for me when I see particularly the really good 11th grade scores is was there a significant change that you noticed in our standard deviation? Because if our students who are doing well did even better, but our students who weren't did poorer, we could still have our mean be going up. But, so I'm wondering if there are some subgroup differences that would give us some instructional opportunities.
I think you're right. I think we could look, I'm wondering, right? We could look at that because I have them here. But I did not pull that data out for tonight's presentation, but it is available. Yeah, it is. To drill down to see exactly what that looks like for which group you're talking about. Yes, we can do that. So here's our reading scores, Winslow versus national norms. This was for the fall. And you have a copy of the slides, so you can look at that if you want. And then this was the third part of NUIA. We did not do this in the spring. We were not required to do it, but in the fall we were, and we will be moving forward. This third part, which is about reading and grammar, a measure of language. So in the slide, orange is our school, and then the kind of purpley color is the national norms. So there was a study done, and I gave you the whole article, actually. I found it interesting. I know some of you on the board are interested in the data stuff, so I gave you the whole article. And if you're not interested, you don't have to read it all. But it was an article that specifically addressed nationally how did our kids do during the pandemic, because those norms were pre-pandemic. And so here are the findings, and I'll just kind of sum it up for you. Basically, kids, and this is not Winslow specific, this is nationally, kids performed, they made growth. The way this is done is kids took it in the fall, they took it in the winter, they took it in the spring. The solid line is the pandemic year, the dashed line is pre-pandemic. So, and we've got third grade, fifth grade, and seventh grade. So you would see here, we would expect this kind of growth from a third grader. And in the pandemic year, that was the growth. Across the board, across the country. So kids made growth, but it wasn't at the rate. And that's not surprising to anyone. It's affirming for us to think, well, if Winslow, and we didn't do a spring and fall, we just did a spring and we've done a fall. But for us as a school system to see that nationally, this is the trend, it kind of makes us feel like, okay, we're all right. We're right in there. And this is the math. And it's interesting to me, when we always look at NUIA scores, ever since I've been here, not just NUIA, the MEA scores, whatever the flavor of the year that happened to have been, we've seen so many of those. Math is always the area where like, in math, we struggle a little bit. But if you look nationally, that's a trend across the country. If you look at the difference between where kids typically have done in math and what they did in the pandemic, you can see math is really in place. And we know this, the junior high knew it. When they changed their schedule from every other day math to everyday math, the kids would benefit from that constant exposure to math. And so when you had a pandemic school, where some kids were out entirely across the country and other kids were in and out, but that had a greater impact. National score. This chart is interesting too, because what this is showing is the little dots are saying pre-pandemic, where kids typically would have scored. And then the line shows where they ended up scoring, but their growth was like -12. And the grades that it impacted the most nationally is our third, fourth, and fifth graders. So for us here locally, we would want to be taking a closer look. Let's see how our third, fourth, and fifth graders, because that seems to be a group, at least in math, that's a group that took a hit nationally. So whether developmentally in math, where the Common Core curriculum is, those skills and those grades, we maybe need to take a close look at that group, because as a group, they seem to have struggled across the board during the pandemic.
And they'll be the ones who benefit the most because you're bringing on board that math program now.
Right. So some takeaways from this, if you elect not to read the whole thing, just kind of a couple takeaways, is the study, to realize this study looked at fall, winter, spring. And in Winslow, we can't do that yet. We only have a spring and a fall. Really, this year, we're going to be able to get the fall, the winter, and the spring, and we'll be able to reflect on our own experience this year and say, okay, did our kids make growth at what rate? And as Jay's saying, what special groups?
how are they maneuvering and so forth. So the more we take this, the more data we'll have to be able to make some conclusions. And then the other takeaway, which is good news for all of us, is that nationally, kids still made gains during the worst of the pandemic schooling. Kids were still learning, kids still made gains. It wasn't at the rate they typically do, but they still made progress, which is good to hear. It's good for us, it's good to hear across the country that kids were still making gains, despite our greatest fears that they were not. Right, the last couple of things I want to offer you just quickly, I appreciate your attention, are some samples of what teachers can do with some of the data. There's tons of stuff teachers can be doing. And we'll talk about some of the challenges to that, but I just wanted to show you that when you go into NUIA as a teacher, you can print all kinds of reports and look at the data every which way you want to look at it. And one of the things that you can do is print out a class report. And I gave you a sample one, just in case you were curious about, well, what does a teacher see with this, how can a teacher use this data? So I gave you a sample class report. And on it, it itemizes and tells you what all these little things are that a teacher can look for. But basically, a teacher can see how their class performed overall, and then this one's reading, how their class performed on each strand or each task of reading or math. And then you can look at each child below. It's on the back side of yours. I didn't make a copy for the slide. But you can look at each child, you can click on them and drill down, you can go all over the place with the data. But just so you can see what teachers have available to them to reflect on, and then to have some conversations about how this might impact instruction. So I just wanted to show you that. And I won't go into this in detail, but I just want to show you that another way that NUIA allows teachers to view data is they can group kids by their RIT scores. You can just go to this website, pull up your class, it will group them for you. So I can see these 3 kids they tended to score a little bit low, and these are the areas they need some extra help in. These kids are kind of in the middle, these kids were exceeding. And this learning continuum piece, if you go to this website, it would put your kids in categories that said, these 3 kids need to be reinforced in this math skill. These 6 kids are ready to move on to the next math skill. So it's quite helpful. The challenge is our teachers having the time, which that's a bad way to say that because this is what they should be doing. But the reality is, and we'll look at some of the challenges, this has been a challenging year to take time out of regular teaching to reflect on the data. So we've come up with some ways that we're going to talk about that. So in terms of what we're doing with the data now, as an administrative team, and we had put together, you've heard Peter speak about our district goals, the building administrators have wrote their building goals attached to those district goals and so forth. And so we had a plan in place and ready to go, and then we started the school year, and many teachers described this as harder than it was last year. I mean, children are like bouncing off the walls, and it's been a wild year. But here are some things we've been able to move forward with despite some of the challenges. This year we created what we call A-Team 2.0. As you may know, the administrative team meets weekly to discuss myriad of topics. And often in those meetings, because it includes all of the administrators across the district, the conversation is not always on curriculum and instruction because we're in COVID purgatory right now. We've got all kinds of other issues to talk about. So we decided in order to move us forward on our goals, we were going to take just the principals, the assistant principals, myself and Peter, and we were going to have a second administrative team meeting once a month called A-Team 2.0 to specifically talk about curriculum, instruction, assessment, teacher evaluation, measuring our goals, all of those things that are so important. We were going to carve out time to do that. And so that is something we've been successful in doing. We have been meeting and talking about those topics specifically. So that's good, that's a win. We also talked in the summer about creating a formal assessment calendar and plan across the district where we would identify, here's when assessments are given, here's the time that we reflect on those and make decisions about instruction. This work has been slowed this year because of challenges with pulling teachers out of classes to have those discussions because of the sub shortage. What we have accomplished on this so far, and all the schools have done this,
elementary school has been the most thorough so far in making a calendar for the year. And I have put it on our website, you can go and look at it, where it shows when we're giving NUIA, when we're giving iReady, when we're giving the DRA rather. And so those are, what we're trying to do is create a culture in Winslow where assessment is an intimate part of the teaching and learning process, not just something we do and then we keep on stepping with our day. We want to make it more of an integral part of what we do. So we're working on that. Another goal is to inform the community, to share more about what we're doing with assessments. And so I created the new webpage, and it has a robust assessment section. And if you were interested, you could go on and read all about NUIA and when we're giving it. And, so I continue to try to put things on there to inform the school community and the community at large. This was going to be our next topic, and then we had a very difficult, as you know, event happen a couple weeks ago, so this was postponed. But what we want to do moving forward is to existing structures and practices we have in place now, and how can we reshape or reuse some of that to talk about the assessment stuff, rather than create new meetings, because teachers' capacity for that is like this big right now. Our sub-capacity for that is like non-existent. But we do have routine FLT meetings, we do have routine department meetings, we do have those things already in place. So my conversation, Peter and I are going to converse with the administrators about how do we take that time that's already in place and start carving out maybe 10 or 15 minutes where we look at, let's talk NUIA for 10 or 15 minutes. Here's a class report, here's how you delve in, and here's what we can do. Like to start using structures that we already have in place rather than adding something new this year to continue this conversation moving forward. So we're going to be working on that. And then the last bullet on there is we acknowledge that NUIA is new to Winslow. So we've not had enough data yet to be able to look at trends of growth over time because we've only had it twice. So I just want to acknowledge that, if we think, oh my goodness, I'm not running around fully NUIA versed. I don't want anyone to worry about that. We've only taken it twice. We just don't have enough data to be able to talk anything about growth with our kids because we just don't know. So I just want to acknowledge that. We will be looking for trends over time, but we need a little more time to be taking the test and let our staff be familiar with it and how it works and so on. And I think that's all I have for you this evening. I'm happy to take questions and try to answer them.
I have more of a comment than I have a question. I think with what you said earlier tonight about getting a new software package, having a math specialist, I think that's a major impact on the future for these scores, and I think that's an obvious thing. I think a big part of it is the goals that you guys have set at your schools. We're all focused that will only help this as well.
Yes.
So I think those two things together, along with just getting out of this pandemic, getting back to regular, those three things in the long term will affect this in a positive manner that we'll be looking at it differently 2-3 years down the road compared to what we're looking at now. So I really think we've set up some things just in stuff we've talked about tonight and in the last few meetings, impressed with the goals that have been set at each school, and I think that's going to only help these scores and the comparisons in the future.
Thank you. I agree. What I like about what we've done this year is I feel like all the oars are pulling in the same direction. From the district goals are reflected in the school goals, are reflected in the decisions we're making about programs and so forth. So I do think we have made an effort to align those things so that we can move forward.
Very good.
You're gonna get quantitative data so you can prove that the math specialist is
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and we also have iReady, which I'm not going to go into today, but we do have another measure specifically for math, which is iReady, and we're meeting this year to look and see how does iReady compare to NUIA and so forth. So we have a specific targeted measure for math, so we're really just some of that.
Overall, the data are very promising. We'll see how it holds up over more data coming in, but it sure looks good. It's a place to start.
Yeah, I would add, I agree that it's encouraging. I find it interesting that the 11th grade numbers, because I'm excited to think that if we can bump up the numbers at the low level, what the 11th grade could look like above the national norm even further than it is, if we're able to bring up
Build on the base, right?
sooner. Because they seem to be making a lot of gains later, but if we can pull that up, then I think that bodes well. But I mean, we've been talking about, the math scores for a while, and I think, it takes a while to put the pieces in place and such, and, that's coming to fruition with where you are with some curriculum you want to offer up.
Right.
And we've been, it's not like we haven't been working on it, it has been worked on.
Right.
So.
One of the things among many that we looked at for a math curriculum was engagement. And when you have third graders that say, I hate math, and you know this about kids, probably if I went around this room, how many of you say, well, Chad, and a reference to it, don't ask me to do math. Right? And little kids say that. Little kids say, I can't draw, it breaks my heart, and I can't do math, I'm not math student, I'm not good at it, I'm not good at it. By third grade, and when we first started these conversations, I looked around the room and I said, do we want that? And everyone was like, no, it's heartbreaking. So what do we do to change that? So that kids believe that they can do it. And so we really have been looking at engagement for our faculty, who some of them are math phobic, let's be honest. For the kids, how can we change the attitude about mathematics? So that it's not intimidating, so that kids don't feel, I can't do it by third grade. That's heartbreaking. We want kids to aspire and think that they can do it. So we're really putting some attention to picking something that does that.
Cal, did you have something to add?
Well, it's hard for me, but outside our fifth grade classrooms right now are bulletin boards with bulbs. The students are filling up as they complete math lessons that are supplemental. And that's provided by some of the sports. So there's no scores there. It just says, how many lessons have I done? So they're out there calling in their lessons every day as they take some of this time during their quiet time or times of the day when they have opportunity to do that. So
if you're interested in the future, I'll talk to you about iReady.
Yeah.
That's what we've been piloting. The fifth grade specifically was given access to some of the lessons. We were given access for free. We did not let everyone have access to that. But the fifth grade is the grade that does that, and they have reported that kids' engagement has gone way up, which is exactly what we want. So that's exciting.
Very good. But we did have Nuea way back when.
We did, yes.
I think.
That's what I like.
How long ago was that, Kyle?
We stopped around 2010 and we used it for 4 or 5 years before that.
Yeah.
We were around then.
Yes,
Everything
I remember
was
those.
new.
I think it's good data. I mean, it's hopefully, going forward, it's been, like you say, it's the flavor of the day because the state keeps changing what their tools are, but.
You just need to understand what you're looking at. It's not
Yeah.
efficiency now, it's growth. So.
Right, well, keep the growth going.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you, Michelle. All right. Encouraging stuff. All right. Vote on appointments.
Move to take them as a lot?
Hang on, before we get there. All right. First thing we have on here is we have a correction to the lot of appointments because there was an incorrect name that was put on here. As you will see on your agenda that was given to you this evening with a correction of Joseph Rosignol for JV girls basketball coach. So I just want to make sure that was noted. So if there's no objection, I would entertain a motion to take them as a lot.
Come on, John.
I move to take them as a lot.
Second.
We have a second. Okay. All in favor of taking them as a lot? Okay, that is unanimous. Very good. Do we have a motion to approve the lot of appointments as corrected?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the lot as corrected? It is unanimous. Very good. Resignations, we did touch on those earlier, and that is quite unfortunate with resignations. But that is a fact of life, so we'll move on and find some other great people to replace these great people. So, just a little harder these days, but we'll do what we can. And for our new members, Peter accepts the resignations, and we don't have to vote on those, so. Other business, so I am suggesting we consider whether or not we want a special meeting in January. Our meeting is very late in the month. And we need to have an organizational meeting to elect the chair, appoint committee assignments, and all those sorts of things. Our January 10th meetings tend to be fairly expensive, if I'm not mistaken there. Because we got a number of things to do, and shortly thereafter we get right into budgets. And I assume January meeting we'll start seeing some preliminary ones, because I know they start on over break. As much as I wish that they have some restful time during their breaks. So, we have a suggested date here that works for you and the administration that we can talk about in regards to whether or not everybody.
I thought we had talked about the possibility of the second Tuesday when we get back, because we get back on the, is it the 4th or something like that?
Yes, we did talk about the 11th.
We talked about bringing it to the 11th.
Because the 10th, we have a conflict. Does the 11th work, and do we want to consider that date? Well, first of all, let's talk about who is available on the 11th. And then we can see if we even have good participation, I guess.
Tuesday. It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday. Monday's a conflict. We decided the first week coming back from the vacation period would be, could be trying. So, so we thought that second week would be good, but the Monday is conflict. So how does the 11th look like for people? Is that going to be a conflict? First of all, to see what our numbers would look like for us to consider. We have thumbs up? Okay. Come on, Nate.
Go for it.
Both all right. Of them. So 11th seems to be the date that works. So I guess the next thing is does it seem to make sense that we have a meeting on that date?
How are you thinking of dividing up the work that needs to get done across the 2 days?
Well, I guess that's the question. First of all, it would be our organizational meeting. So we elect the chair, we elect the vice chair, we talk about committee assignments and so forth, which tends to take a little bit of time, particularly where we're going to have 2 new members. And we have members that have joined us along the way since we've had prior committee assignments. So, so anyway, so there's that, which tends to take a little bit of time in itself. And I guess the question is I don't know what Peter proposes that he would have of other things we might want to discuss to kind of bite into the later January meeting so that we're not doing it all at once. And I don't want to necessarily add extra meetings to all our administrators. So where we don't necessarily need to, but what do you think, Peter? We might have beyond organizational.
You might want to go into executive session and discuss some of these contracts, because as you are aware, you have teachers' contracts, ed tech contracts, secretarial contracts, custodial contracts. And there's another group that we need to negotiate. So we might want to go into executive session to discuss some of these pieces that are going to
prelude our.
According to Mike, he wants to get this going early in the season, so I'm assuming that
he would like to start negotiations now, early January. I think that's could be a conflict for some of you, so it might be more late January. I know Joel has a conflict with work on that.
For me, the third week of January is probably the soonest that I could be available, given some work commitments.
So somebody needs to, you need to respond to him.
Yes, I can respond to Mike. I actually kind of expect to see him tonight, but he's probably watching. We're thinking a week later, Mike, I'll email you.
I think the other thing that Mike would like to do is have conversations about the ed tech contracts and the teacher contracts and not put delay one over the other. So have an initial meeting about both and then 1 week negotiate teachers, another week negotiate ed techs, the next week back to teachers, ed techs until we get them resolved. This is a bad year because they typically don't fall in the same year, but as you know, the last time we negotiated teacher contracts, we went with a 2-year contract versus a 3, so it hit on this year, so we're getting everything right now.
So,
We
and
probably
of
should
course,
update the new people on why that's so. I mean, I think the major reason was the unknowing of what COVID was gonna bring us. We didn't wanna get too, that might be affected, because at that point, when we were negotiating, we didn't even know that there was gonna be federal money.
I mean, we're negotiating virtually and
It was
and all that,
like
so
negotiating like
kinda-
this, basically, what we were doing.
So there's a number of factors and, well, we're still dealing with it, here we are. But yeah, obviously the organizational part of the meeting is important. John and I have been on these, let's see, it's just
I've done 3 or 4 teacher contracts.
of the work we'll have for a board at the beginning of next year. You and I have been the only people that will be remaining. It's been part of negotiations, right? Neither one of you guys have been on this.
But what was at the end?
But the reason for that is because, as I remember correctly, last year when we had the organizational meeting, it was said that all the meetings have to be during the workday. So basically, it meant that the board couldn't really fully be represented, because anybody that had a regular work was not able to represent the board. So that's something I'm gonna have a lot of questions about in January, because if we're gonna represent the board, we need to schedule in a way that allows the board to participate.
Well, that I guess will be a part of the conversation, I guess, for the various committees and such. We'll have some other new members and, we'll have to see how best we can balance availability with the scheduling for the various positions.
So are
Yes.
you basically saying for this January 11th meeting, that we'll do the organizational piece, do the executive session piece to talk about the contracts, and then at the regular meeting, do this?
You have to have the winter sports
Yes.
update if it's needed.
Yes, and we might touch on the winter sports, might be a part of that special meeting if we need to talk about that. And who knows what else will come up before then, because, I mean, there's it's one of the reasons I thought it was a good idea, because there's a lot of things going on, and it's a long time between now and the end of January to not have a chair in place, not have committees in place, because technically those don't exist until we have an organizational meeting, so. So I thought it'd be best that we have that meeting sooner rather than later.
It's not fun to have an emergency meeting either, because then the public doesn't get the advance notice.
So
So
anyway,
I'd rather see them have a chance.
and, who knows what will be on the agenda by the time we get there. I mean, we'll do what we can, but we don't necessarily need to make an extra meeting for everybody. We'll see what's on the agenda, but I don't necessarily, I don't know if we'll have a necessity for all the administrators to be here, for example, for the duration of the meeting.
Have the night off.
Particularly if they don't have an agenda item that they need to specifically speak to. We'll see what the agenda looks like, I guess, when we get there, but we don't need to add to their load currently, unnecessarily. Hopefully, less will be necessary. So does the 11th sound good? We don't have to vote on it per se. So,
As long as we have a quorum.
We have a quorum and we have consensus, then we can move forward with that. And if we get there and world is quiet, we can always not do it. But as of now, do we have a consensus for the 11th?
Yes, well, I'm good.
Yes. Okay. Nate's in, right?
You'll be with us in spirit.
Okay.
Spirit.
All right, so why don't we,
Watch our lines.
we plan on that, and, I'll ask if Peter could, or Amanda, whoever you could, if you could send out the current committee assignments to everybody, sooner rather than later, I guess, whenever you get a moment, so people can be thinking about that before that meeting.
They also might have questions on what the committee does. Some people like,
You can do that, and feel free to contact me, or Peter, or whoever, to discuss that, if, I guess, you get some questions. I mean, obviously, we'll discuss it at the meetings, but to give you, if there's certain information you need to give it some more thorough thought prior to the meeting, then I'd be happy to share what I know about them. I'm not on any, I'm not on every committee, but I'm on quite a few. So, and yes, to share that is not a bad thing. So, all right, so we're on to the 11th. 6 o'clock, probably right here. All right. very good.
Motion to go into executive session.
you have to be
Pursuant to 1 MRSA paragraph 405 6A, assignment of official appointees, employees, superintendent evaluation contract, and 1 MRSA paragraph 405 6E, litigation pending or contemplated.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of going to executive session?
With that short 3-minute break.
All right. We will have a break before we present. Thank you, everybody. Have a restful vacation, please.
Good job.